Of course, every situation and every leader is different and unique. And also, there are some core challenges that come up again and again. Today, we're thinking about 5 of the key challenges changemakers and would be change agents face.
You're listening to the Joyous Justice Podcast,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin with Tracy Guy Decker.
In a complex world in which systemic oppression conditions us to deny others and our own humanity, let's dedicate ourselves to the pursuit and embodiment of wholeness, love, and thriving in the world and in our own lives. It's time to heal and flourish our way to a more joyously just future. Hi, Tracy. Welcome back from vacay.
Thanks, April.
I was just mentioning to you earlier in our conversation before we started recording, while it was partially terrifying to have you gone for a week, during the actual week itself, something about it just felt so right and good to know that you were spending time with family and in your old stomping grounds and doing fun things and resting and exploring the world and just engaging your mind and heart and spirit in different ways and doing your workouts in hotel gyms and just doing new fun things. But it's great to have you back too. So
Thanks. It's good to be home.
Yeah. Okay. So in just a matter of days, or maybe it's actually already underway and it's not too late if you want to sign up, we will be in the midst of a live 9-day workshop with 4 core days and then 5 bonus days for those who want to ask more questions, hear some case studies, engage in group coaching, just have more unscripted time with us. Yeah, I'm really excited. Roadmap to Resilience. What's our tagline for it, or what's the line underneath it? Brokenness, broken world.
Meet moments of brokenness without breaking yourself.
That's it. Meet moments of brokenness without breaking yourself. Yes, exactly. So yeah. So, I just thought it would be worthwhile for us as we enter this week, of spreading the word, of welcoming all of the people who have signed up, to discuss together here and to share with you, our beloved listener. Hi. Why host this live workshop? Why are we doing it? What is it addressing, resolving that's happening in the world? Because we are smart, brilliant, I want to say busy, but I'm trying to contradict busyness, but smart, brilliant women who are navigating and demanding schedules and circumstances, who both deeply care about justice. So why a live workshop called Roadmap to Resilience, of all the many things we could do, right? And we came up with some pretty solid answers that we wanted to share with you and hope that it resonates, inspires, and or helps you feel less alone, and also perhaps make you realize I should visit joyousjustice.com and sign up for this. And or I think this would be great for my mama or my friend or my entire team or a committee in my congregation. Okay, so here's what we want to say about this. Why Roadmap to Resilience? I want to give a little bit of background here, and then we'll get into, of many, many different reasons, some of the things that we are thinking of is that there's a lot at stake. Stakes are high right now. There is a lot that's happening in our world. Yes, there's a lot of joy and abundance in different ways, but also whether we look at politically, environmentally, in terms of social justice movements, in terms of strife happening around the world, there are a lot of challenges and issues that we're facing. And in some ways, this isn't new. And it also is continuing to, some of these dysfunctions and dysfunctional dynamics are getting worse over the passage of time and or just aren't getting resolved. And I think most of us agree that we all deserve better, and that we would like to move things forward in powerfully healing, productive ways for collective well-being, for our personal well-being, and for the advancement of the issues and values that we care most about. So pragmatically, why we created Roadmap to Resilience, why we propose this, why we're offering this is because, yes, there's a lot of good people on this planet. There are a lot of really wonderful activists who are doing incredible work. And in my experience, and in Tracy's as well, there are chronic barriers and challenges that seem to undermine social justice work, and even just doing good work in the world in general. It seems to undermine the sustainability of that work. We see a lot of people who engage in this work getting hurt or exhausted or confused and disoriented. And collectively, I would say both, I'm excited by some of the progress we're seeing, and I think it's safe and rational to say that overall, given the amount of challenges we're facing right now in general, we're not making enough progress, or not making as ideal of amount of progress as we need to be making in order to lead to large scale pivots and shifts in our lives, and also in our movements and in our societies, in order to move our communities and societies in the direction we want to, and that direction being a direction of collective liberation in which there is greater social justice and well-being available to everyone. And there's safety. And anything else you want to add to that, Tracy? Wellness, that people can engage in meaningful work, that they can have enough food to feed their family, that they can have a home, and that our environment and our world, that the harm is significantly reduced that's being done to our planet, and we start living in ways that are much more in concert with what is good for the collective of humanity, and also for this beautiful, blessed planet we live on.
I think that covers
Yeah.
all of it. All that.
Yeah.
All of that.
All of that.
Yeah.
And so now I wanted to think about five-ish, or share five-ish patterns that we see that contribute to individuals and movements, their collective efforts or desire for collective wellness and belonging and justice. What gets in the way of us being able to actualize it?
Right.
And we want to share these different things as symptoms, hoping that you can notice and see, like, oh yeah, those are things that are definitely happening. And all of these dynamics are issues that the insights and frameworks that we teach within Roadmap to Resilience and our other programs really powerfully counteract and resolve often, or bring much closer to resolution, and put people on a path where they start to feel and see that they not only have clarity around what they're doing, but they're also able to make the progress they want and have energy and rest too.
Yeah. So the first one that we wanted to talk about was stress and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps this
is something you might have seen show up.
Well, like part of me feels like, well, this goes without saying. Of course, we're all stressed and we all are anxious, and then I realized, oh, that's not actually helpful for me to say that.
And also, it's not true.
That's what my hesitation was.
Right, and it's not true. Lots of people think that everyone is stressed out, and most, maybe arguably because most, but actually not everyone is stressed out, and that actually doesn't have to be our default mode of being.
Right. And specifically, the way that I want to remind myself and our listeners, specifically the way that stress and anxiety gets in the way of that more joyous and just world that April described, is in my mind, it really comes down to basic like biology, right? Like stress, anxiety response, the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze is like is an urgent moment where like the saber-toothed tiger is gonna, I know we didn't actually, humans didn't exist at the same time as saber-toothed tiger, but whatever, the big predator is going to attack. And so our physiological response allows us to get out of danger. And now the stress that we have from the deadlines and the political news and the all of the things that we have to do,
people pleasing, the weight of people's expectations, so many different sources,
all of those things, right?
External pressure weighing in and down
are creating the stress responses in us today. Like there isn't actually that, oh my gosh, I need to run away from the bear, which for our ancestors happened and then calmed. And living at that heightened state all the time is not actually the way this body was designed to work. And therefore it does in fact get in the way of our best thinking, because in those moments of run away from the bear, it wasn't about best thinking. It was about get out of danger. So I just wanted to like remind us all that it's not just sort of, oh, you don't need to be stressed. It's not just feel good. There's actually
pragmatic,
a lot of very specific biological, physiological reasons why the constant state of stress and anxiety that many of us are feeling is getting in the way of our best lives and our best world.
Thinking, capacity to work with other people. And we're going to dive into this one a lot more in the very first day. This is where we're starting our workshop experience, is diving in on providing some resources and reframes to start to shift this. And one of the things that the reason why I thought about to say that is because one of the things that I thought to say is something that we'll be diving into more deeply in the workshop itself. But the other thing that I would add to what Tracy said that was already just beautiful, whole and wonderful as it was, is that in all of this time and space and energy that stress and anxiety takes up, and specifically when it happens in key moments, it diverts us from being able to access different opportunities to shift our circumstances. It keeps us, it clouds our vision and keeps us from noticing that we do always have the power of choice. And often it has so much momentum that we miss that. So on day one, which we're not going to go through the full itinerary for it, but on day one, we're going to start to demystify that experience and start to offer tools and insights that can help reground people and be able to not only stem the harm that all of this stress and anxiety is causing, but actually start to make space for new possibilities and opportunity that in the absence of that, there is room for. The second piece that we thought to cover, that's something that often keeps people from making the progress they want, is in one way or another, a lack of confidence.
Right. And that shows up in different ways, the lack of confidence.
A lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. The two primary ways that in my mind it shows up are sort of the external and internal lack of confidence. So, and you, April, have beautiful ways of talking about the way those two things are very much related. But my experience is in this sort of being bogged down by the enormity of what I face. And that creates a lack of confidence in me. Like, how could I
ever,
right, affect the enormity of what is broken? And then that leads to sort of an internalized, well, how can I make any change at all? Which has become sort of like a vicious cycle of lack of confidence based on external and internal assessments that I'm doing. I think you have another way to talk about that, though.
Yeah.
April.
So
share that?
I love what you said, and I just want to add some greater depth and one that was already nuanced and sophisticated, and I want to add in some additional oomph to that to say that you spoke of the internalization, and I would also specifically note that one way that lack of confidence shows up is experiencing and internalizing of oppressive messages that many of us have received around different facets of our identity or parts of our experience where we were told that we were not enough or that we were insufficient or not good enough or too much. Or you can also have a converse experience or like a reversed like a weird experience where you actually have a non-targeted identity, and either you have guilt or
Mm-hmm.
or just there's also oppression, as I've often taught, and I will just continue to teach again, that in oppressive circumstances, the oppression harms everyone. It hurts the people who are targeted and marginalized more, but the people who are positioned to have the upper hand, it also hurts them too. And there's different ways that that gets internalized that can actually lead to a lack of confidence in certain ways that I hope, without going into all the details with that, that might resonate with some of you, or you might think
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that speaks to me because I'm someone who doesn't fit a lot of these different labels of having been targeted, but I also experience a profound sense of lack of confidence, either ubiquitously or around specific places where I want to have confidence, and I
Right.
just don't yet.
Right. I remember when I first became really passionate about fighting structural racism, I can
Mm-hmm.
remember saying like, there's not much I can do. I'm just an administrator at a museum. Like that was what I was telling myself and telling others, which was this lack of confidence, and also became sort of a shield that I hid behind, like a an excuse for not taking more on.
But also
Um,
rooted in some sincere, true
absolutely,
grappling, right? Yeah.
absolutely.
And so here's the piece where I just love this connection that I made, that I want to take it even deeper and broader, is to say, and just build on what you already said and what I added to it, is with that internalized oppression, one form of internalized oppression that nearly all humans carry is the internalized oppression of having been a young person. And what I will say is that nearly all of us, basically all of us, experienced some to significant disempowering experiences throughout our childhood, that we did not get a chance to heal at a deeper level. And by the way, what I'm saying here, some of you might be like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing," or you might already know it, or it might feel like a stretch. If it does, just roll with it. Don't worry if this feels like a bit of a stretch. But what I would say is that this also applies and further explains what Tracy was already talking about. And what I will say is that when you have an opportunity to be in supportive, beloved community that is trauma informed and counter oppressive, like the community and spaces and containers we provide at Joyous Justice, over time you can start to notice that as adults, yes, can any true, like no one person can solve, say, like world hunger, but as we engage in counter oppressive and communal and paired and really supportive coaching and counter oppressive healing work, we can start to regain our knowledge and understanding that, oh, actually, as grown adults with adult brains, with adult networks and connections, there's actually a lot that we have the capability and capacity to do, that we are actually profoundly powerful. But nearly all humans have recorded in our brains memories, often that aren't even conscious, of having been a little person and having had big thoughts with a lot of clarity that we could get it done. And likely we could have if we had supportive people around us, if we could speak, if we could do the different things we need, if there wasn't child's oppression, if there were people around us who said, wow, that's a really brilliant idea. Let's help the animals in our neighborhood in this way. But often we were silenced. It's very, very common for young people to be silenced, to have our ideas dismissed, to have these different things happen. Some of it's just normal parenting. Some of it is actually quite oppressive, let alone other big hurts that we experienced. But as adults, what's amazing about just kind of life in general, whether it's about fitness or health or eating or our thinking, is that with the right nutrients and the right support and some time and some work and integration, over time, we can make up for lost time. And with the right supports and resources, more quickly regain our capacity to see, like, oh my goodness, myself alone, let alone with partners or with a community or with a group of people, I actually have tremendous capacity to affect a lot of change. So I think I went too far on that, but basically, go ahead.
Well, actually, I think you segued us really beautifully into our next
Oh, perfect.
symptom
Thank
that
you.
we wanted to talk about, which was sort of isolation, or a feeling of loneliness, or lack of support, which I think you're talking about, like the way that the community helps with lack of confidence. Also, it's all of these are interrelated, but sort of that feeling of isolation that I think it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy too in work to better the world, and just in general, where we feel like, oh, we start to feel like we're totally alone. Other people don't see it the way we see it, or, for whatever reason, like there are many ways in which maybe we're there, whatever leadership role we have feels very
And may I
lonely.
interject here really
Yeah, of
quickly?
course. Of course, of
As also
course.
too, that all of what you're saying is in the context of white supremacist delusional culture and patriarchy, both of which really heavily overemphasize or emphasize
Individualism.
toxic what we would, individualism, or as we would often in certain spaces would refer to as toxic
Right.
individualism.
Right.
And then we can have thoughts that further emphasize that, but a part of this comes from conditioning that we collectively have. So I just
Exactly.
wanted to provide that broader context for what you're saying.
No, thank you. That's really.
But I know but I wanted to make sure, and a number of our
well
listeners
timed.
know, but just to weave that in, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's well timed. We've been taught that we should be able to do it on our own. Like that's part of what feeds the feeling of isolation and loneliness, because we've been taught that we,
That's
if
not
we were
true.
worthy, then we wouldn't need help, or we wouldn't need assistance, we wouldn't need support, we wouldn't need whatever. And that's just not true.
We're a
And
social species. We're like not that different in certain ways from the rest of the animal kingdom. We need each other. We need to be interconnected in order to survive and thrive.
right. And so in the same way that the community that you were just naming helps to counter the lack of confidence, it is the direct counter to isolation and loneliness. And it in work to better the world, I think just human condition in white supremacist contexts, loneliness comes up again and again. I can think of moments
So much
in my activist work where, something wasn't going well and I felt like I was carrying it all. And I just felt very lonely, and I wasn't alone. But I had, as you say, I've been trained to think that, this is a thing I have to do on my own. So
So this is
I
an
think that was
interesting
a
one.
nice. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying that you segued
Oh, thank
us
you.
into this.
Right. And I would add some additional layers that this is an interesting one to me, because this is one that is both, whereas lack of confidence is something really that only we can assess and we can decide. I mean, we could also get feedback from like a coach or something like that. Whereas the piece around loneliness, there's both an element that's our thoughts, and there's also a pragmatic thing. Like if we're literally alone, and don't have connection, which the way that capitalism and our society has evolved is really isolated. One of the things I love about living in Senegal, and I hope it stays this way, but if it's on track to be similar to the Western world, but which it seems like it is, but we'll see, is that different parts of Senegal, mirror different decades of the United States. And I would say socially that life in Senegal is more like that of life of the US and around the 60s or 70s, where people are a lot more connected. And there are a number of intramural leagues, and families connect more often and stay closer together. And that was one of the big draws for me to relocate to Senegal, among a number of reasons, is that it felt like it would deeply address some of my deeper senses of loneliness and disconnection, right? But back on track, that's an interesting interlude, but back on track, a couple other things. So there's two dynamics here, because there's ways in which, as Tracy was saying, that I just want to pull out here, where at times we truly are just missing people, like either because of the position we're in or how we're set up or the ways that we're positioned, we are alone. And then there are also ways, because of the internalization of this specific manifestation of oppressive dynamics, we may perpetuate that unknowingly, that loneliness and isolation, because of these unhelpful, toxic, or occasionally, but often not, occasionally helpful, but not good to use all the time, beliefs around individualism, around how we're supposed to do things alone. We're literally actually not supposed to hardly do anything alone. We are a social species. We are humans. It is normal for us to be in relationships, to receive help, to exchange help, to collaborate, to work together, to work across lines of difference, right? And so But yet still, because of the messages we've internalized, we can actually be surrounded by lots of people who would help, but we have a number of us. I know I've experienced myself, and as Tracy just stated, she has too, although I've contradicted it significantly over the past few years through a lot of work and learning that I've done. There are times where we feel alone, where we could just pick up the phone or open our door or reach out to a group that we're with, but have these messages that keep us from reaching for that support. And the result is that we often experience loneliness, which is fatiguing, because, not to overemphasize, but we are a social species. So we're meant, much of the time, not all the time, but we're meant to be receiving support and interacting with other people in ways that feel good to us, in ways that are consensual. And also, the other symptom part of it is that because of this, a result of all of this is that we often end up shouldering too much of a burden that is not sustainable. And it's just not sustainable and is harmful to us. Like, occasionally, if we need to take on something bigger, that makes sense. But a lot of us chronically are carrying too much. So shall we move on to our
Yes.
fourth and fifth ones?
Yeah. Number 4 is not knowing where to start or not knowing where to go next, which often has us ending up being bystanders, where we're sort of feeling just constantly pulled in competing directions or just watching on the sidelines.
Or like a volleyball, where we're not just getting pulled in different directions, but like it feels like we're in a pinball machine game where this leader says this, and then this racial justice leader says this, but then this social justice leader says this, but then my rabbi says this. And, all of these different messages and I think what contributes to this, one, this was harder before, but I think with social media and depending upon how mindful or how just kind of autopilot we are as we engage on social media, there are all kinds of messages that can be coming our way. And for those of us who either lack social justice education and or are missing resources in the other areas that we spoke about, if we are lacking confidence and clarity, if we are lacking connection to a community either that can help inform us and or help us get clear about what we want to do, that can further exacerbate this sense of being really clear that something needs to be done. I have something to contribute. I know I am meant to be a part of the solution here, and I just am being frozen, being stuck in place, watching things happen, feeling like you're like, window shopping around social justice or social change and watching things happening on the inside of the work and feeling very much on the outside, which also aligns with the isolation, right? So all these things compound on each other.
I think there are a couple of things that feed into this specific symptom of kind of not knowing what to do next. One is fear of making a mistake, which we have talked about at length before. So I'm not going to go into that again. We'll put a link in the show notes to our earlier episode where we talk about that. But
we'll likely talk about it again, but we'll do it in another episode.
No doubt. Another one too that I want to name, since we already talked about the effect of white supremacy culture today, is either or thinking. This sort of all or nothing, either or about anything, where, I see this with like intentional eating. People say, oh, well, I could never, we pizza is our Friday night thing for my family, so I could never be vegan. Well, that implies that it's, like it's all or nothing. You're either completely 100% plant-based 100% of the time or not at all. Whereas we all know that, like, just like with exercise, like there's no way I could work out 5 days a week. Okay. Could you do one? Like, every bit that we do helps.
And I think either all or nothing and either or, and also perfectionism. Like, I think there's different, both facets of all of those that play out that
they're
I need
all
to.
Related.
And they're all related to this sort of waspy, puritanical, like Puritan culture of this like good versus bad, like, or good versus evil. And like, it needs to be like just either or. Yeah. So
I think that really contributes to sort of the not knowing where to start or not knowing where to go next feeling, because, and even the pinball experience that you just named, because if it's all or nothing, if it's either or, and this person says something that doesn't 100% align with this person, then we just sort of like our little robot in the middle going, does not compute, and like steam coming out of our ears. Whereas if we could embrace both, and if we could embrace incrementalism in its best form, which is incremental movement toward a goal, not one incremental step and then we're done, then that feeling of being frozen or of just being sort of stuck or a bystander, I think would resolve.
Okay, I want to add a few more. I want to add my stank on this one. So I
Do
had a bunch of ideas. So you talking about this brought, and our conversation on the podcast to this point, like there's like multiple things here that I want to not take too much time on, but that I want to drop into the mix here. So one is also that, again, as I mentioned, that these things compound a bit. So Tracy started out by talking, and I did too, sort of talking about, in some senses, the newer person here who's like, I don't know where to start or what to do next. And I also want to speak to the person who might be more experienced or even a veteran social justice person who might be like, I may not know where to go next. Like I'm in it. And also I don't know what to do, or I don't know where to go next, that may be more rooted in an accumulation of too much unhealed pain, of an accumulation of certain defeats, of a core strategy that you've been working toward getting undercut and not having an ability to pivot, and not having bandwidth to pivot because there's too much disenfranchisement or just like discouragement, depending upon where we are in the placement of this, right? If someone with some privilege might be just discouragement. For those of us who also experience marginalization, it might actually be that we just got disenfranchised in the midst of fighting for something, and or both, right? And so this is something that I see happening a lot everywhere, from folks who want to get involved and just feel like they just don't know enough, or they're not sophisticated enough or like cool enough, or they don't necessarily resonate with all of the social justice language. And what I want to say is I don't know if you're listening to this podcast, but if you are, I'm so glad you are here, because in Joyous Justice World, we both can help people cultivate a particular vocabulary if they want. And also too, it's not required. There are many different ways to do this work. I believe that our movements should be diverse. And to me, it's much more about how we're thinking and how we're feeling and how we're showing up. And so if you're worried about some of those different components, please come to our free workshop about Roadmap to Resilience, because I think that that's also just another way that hurt shows up, that a lot of people who have accumulated a lot of hurts, they can be sensitive at times about certain ways things are, that are the ways that they can get sensitive about the ways that people articulate certain things. And that's something that if it's like very offensive or problematic, we'll help you to know that. But if it's not, like, it's fine. Like one thing at a time, it's cool. And we can balance rigor and compassion simultaneously. But back to not knowing where to go next. This is something that a number of my beloveds and former clients and current clients have been reaching out recently around, saying, like, I'm noticing there's just a lot of brokenness in movement space. And I really want to be advancing love in this work. And I'm noticing a real lack of it. And what I need to say to this person, when they're listening to this podcast, I need to respond to this person and say, like, to me, actually, you are entering the eye of the storm. And you're doing really great work if you're starting to see some of the core places of brokenness. And this is a time where it's really critical to fortify your own inner strength and your own sense of love and self-love and collective love, and then get a little bit more analysis to understand what's happening, buckle down and keep going. And if that's where you are in this work, if you're not a newbie, if you're not feeling stuck, but you're just feeling fatigued and a little resigned, then Roadmap to Resilience will hopefully reinvigorate you. You might feel a little jaded as you're hearing something, but hopefully over the course of the journey, it will reinvigorate you and give you a number of different ideas of, oh yeah, that's the place where I can get more resource and support. And with this insight, actually, let me just try it and see. And we will be excited to celebrate with you on the other side of having taken some of these interventions and steps to reinvigorate yourself and to relieve some of the suffering that you've experienced. And the last piece that I want to say about this, because there's lots of different facets of this one, I realize, but we got to keep moving, is another element of not knowing where to start or go next is not being in deep relationship or having confidence around what you want.
Mm.
That being clear about what elements of justice are important to you. Like there's lots of information out there. And one of the things that can help you delineate it is being more clear about knowing what you want. And also, too, that is something among the many different things that we're weaving throughout this roadmap to resilience is teaching some strategies to help you clarify that. Because as you know, that helps you start to be able to discriminate in a good way, to decipher and sift through and say, okay, that's important, but that actually isn't my slice of the work. So I can listen in, but know that that actually isn't where I'm making my intervention. So I can actually stay focused here, right? So that's another element of this too, another sub symptom of not knowing where to go next or not knowing where to start even is not being anchored in, or maybe you know it, but you lack confidence around believing that that is worthy, that you are worthy and that that is worthy and worthwhile, which is if that's the case, come to Roadmap to Resilience. And finally, we saved the best for last. Arguably, well, we can debate it. You can let us know if you disagree, but we saved a really great one for last. Let me say it that way. Tracy, do you want to share what it is?
Yes, sure. So one of the symptoms that is pervasive for folks is a compartmentalization or fracturing of support and learning,
and living and leadership and justice work.
And just being, right? So
of your life, compartmentalization of your life.
You're expected to, be a body in the gym and to be a spirit in the synagogue or the church or the mosque and to be an activist
or temple.
I said, or temple, thank you. And or to be, to be an activist in movement spaces, and as if those are three separate beings, when in fact, obviously, you are.
And then also like self-care when maybe never, or like whenever that happens, and like taking care of our hearts also whenever that happens.
Yeah, or maybe not, right? And even
or not, or maybe for maybe a handful of people, actually, that is something that they also work on.
Right, but not as I certainly was not taught to do those things all as the same person, right? I've had to find my way, in some part with your help, some I've sort of figured out on my own. But that kind of compartmentalization
is normal and common, but also
it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting, and it is not sustainable, to keep kind of sectioning off pieces of oneself, especially when different places are sort of saying that other part of you, that's less important. I don't care about that part, right? That the body that you've got, I don't care about that body. Like that doesn't matter, right? And that's just it's not sustainable because we are whole beings.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I'm going to go a little meta here for a second. Like this is at the heart in some ways of why it's been hard for me to quote unquote, like pick a niche or a specific intervention, because part of my intervention or offering to the field, to the world through Joyous Justice is actually to contradict that foundational framework, is that as a multiracial person who's lived in almost every region of the United States, who came from an interfaith family, who is interspiritual, I am so clear that we need different threads. We need to weave these things together to have a holistic experience in our living and our life and our leadership. And so the roadmap to resilience, we're giving you a taste of what it's like to work with us at Joyous Justice, where we're not just helping you gain some empowerment. We're not just helping you think about practices and rhythms that can weave healing into your daily life. We're not just helping you think about really powerful, effective strategic leadership. what we are offering you is a process, a system that accounts for all of these variables. And as you work through the process, you get to work on one step at a time. And at the end of it, have accounted for a range of different elements of your experience in a way that at first might be like a little much, because it's like, oh, but as you start to move through it, you're like, oh, actually, this is handling all these other things. All these other things that I am doing either get boosted by it or become irrelevant because I've taken care of it in one foul swoop of working through a process that is not compartmentalized, that is integrative, that is holistic, that accounts for your spirit and your body and your emotions and how to manage your mind effectively and how to think about the different circumstances you are navigating, how to understand contemporary and historical oppression and the ways that it plays out consciously and unconsciously in daily life. And so that's a symptom that we're also really, I am very excited to work with y'all on. And I'm continuing, full disclosure, to think about how to talk about it, because it's really atypical, because most of the world is deeply compartmentalized. And part of what I'm saying and offering is you don't actually have to, I'm not saying you have to change overnight, but you don't have to compromise this anymore. You can actually have a resource and a tool that helps you easily on your own terms in ways that make sense for you, that's customizable for you, be able to move through these different things and clarify what you want, clarify what you need, clarify where's the intervention that you can provide, and how can you position yourself to mend your own brokenness, to avoid brokenness, so that you are best equipped to navigate with peace and clarity and wise discernment increasingly over time the challenges that we face in our lives and in the world. Yeah, I think ultimately what I hope that we will communicate through the Roadmap to Resilience workshop is, yeah, a lot of shit's gone down. A lot of us have bruises and scars, but we are mighty and we are sacred. And when we come together and support one another, we are incredibly powerful as individuals and all the more so as a collective. And yes, these symptoms are very real and they are happening, but actually with the right tools and the right process in place that we can make our own and move through, which we're going to be teaching and sharing over the course of Roadmap to Resilience, actually a number of those symptoms can dissolve, and what I've found through learning these tools myself and also teaching them to our clients in different containers that we've hosted over this past year is that it doesn't necessarily, sometimes it resolves issues in a person's life immediately, but even if it doesn't, the relief and the forward movement is so empowering. Like, oh my gosh, this isn't a fixed reality. I can actually be less stressed. So if you think, so just all of that to say, I'm not saying that this is a cure-all or it's an overnight thing. This is teaching you, it's almost like choreography. It's new choreography to help you navigate and dance and move toward justice in the ways that you want to dance and move. But some basic steps that can help you avoid different things and start to anticipate other challenges and understand what's happening in your world so that you can become a badass, peaceful warrior or mystic or whatever noun you like. I don't use it a lot publicly, but I really resonate with warrior. That's what I'm here to do. But yeah, anything else you want to add, Tracy?
It is not too late, y'all. Sign up for Roadmap to Resilience. We will put the link in the show notes. It kicks off on Monday, December 5th.
Yep. And if you have a hard time accessing the show notes, if you just go to joyousjustice.com, there's a big button on the homepage where you can click and just share your name and email, and you will be registered and you will get over the course of 4 days, we will have 1 hour sessions that will be chock full of insight and resources and interactive opportunities. We will be sending you a super wonderful workbook. If you are a studious workshop participant and you want to engage, or you just want to be able to track your experience, not necessarily fill it out, but have that, we will be sending that to you as well. And then we have 5 additional bonus days for Q&A, for interaction, for conversation with you to help deepen the learning and explore other possibilities with you around what you want based upon what you've learned over the past few days. So yes, as Tracy said, it's not too late. It's never too late. Feel free to join us and sign up and or share this with your network. We would really appreciate it if this sounds exciting to you, or if you think this would be a helpful resource. Please feel free to share. And if you want help thinking about that, you can always email us at hello@joyousjustice.com. Or actually, if you want to just use the contact page on our website, you can also follow up if you have any specific questions about participating in it and or bringing your community in if you're a community leader. Take care. Much love. Thanks for tuning in.
To learn more about Joyous Justice LLC, our team, and how you can get involved with our community, check out the info in our show notes or find us at joyousjustice.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, show us some love.
Subscribe wherever you're listening.
Tell your people. Share what you're learning and how your leadership is evolving.
Stay humble,
but not too humble.
and keep going.
Because the future is ours to co-create.